Would you pray with me? Lord Jesus, we need you. And remind us that you are the thing, the one who is better than all that we know. Remind us that we need you. In your name, Lord, we pray. Well, it's great to be home this morning. As I mentioned at the beginning of the service, I lost my voice shouting for Blake Westland winning his contest, but it was really bad 2 days ago. It doesn't hurt, but I feel fine now, and I'll make it through the rest of the day, I believe, so going on. But it was a great mission trip. It was one of the better ones. I think I've gone on a mission trip with the kids now 12 summers in a row for a different week. My favorite still by far was the summer in New Orleans after Katrina. I remember pulling in there. We went in, we had to stay in tents. 275 guys in this one tent, bunks 3 high, this far apart, and they had a line of 65 portalettes. I remember the kids crying and said, "What are those?" And I said, "You'll know soon enough." Sort of this one, we have a little bit of experience because Ponce used to be the capital of Puerto Rico. Now it's the second biggest city in Puerto Rico. And our conditions were quite rustic. Probably the biggest hassle we had was the bathrooms there. There were 3 showers for about 40 guys with almost no water pressure. It was just dribbling out, and it was not good at all. There's only one shower that was anything worthwhile. But actually, we were thankful Matthew Bradshaw was dancing around in there when I knocked the shower head off, and then more water came out. So they soon took the shower heads off all the showers, and it had to dribble out. But it was a challenge, It is definitely primitive. A lot of places in the world, the toilet paper, you can't put it in the toilet. You have to put it in a basket on the side of the toilet after you use it. And then you find out, well, we have duty on a certain day to clean out the bathrooms, and you get to clean out the baskets and all that, and the kids are thinking, oh no. And that's sort of a shocking thing. And the area where we worked in, it was called Bellica. Tim mentioned in the beginning of the service, it was about 8 streets wide and about a half a mile long. And I'd say 80% of the houses, you look at them and say, well, that's substandard, that's fallen apart, it's in terrible shape. There was an incredible need of all the houses. We worked side by side on 2 different houses, half on one side, half on the other, fixing up, painting, demolishing sheds, putting up fences, and doing all sorts of things with these 2 houses. And our group together there is, you see the people in their incredible need, and you know what? They need help. Do you know as the bathrooms and the problems there, do you know what, for me, but personally, there's only one thing I ask when I go on a mission trip. And do you know what it is? Coffee early in the morning. And in fact, when we had the orientation, when Tim and I checked in, that's the only thing I asked the college students who run it. I said, I get up early and I want coffee. And I said, what time do you have coffee? And they said, 7:30. And I said, that's not going to do it. I get up early. And so, but they said, well, there's a Burger King open 3 blocks away, and they have coffee at 6 o'clock. And I said, I can live with that. So every morning I was down there at 6 o'clock getting coffee. And I wasn't alone. The first Monday morning, there was 4 adults over there with me, and by the end of the week, there was 9. Sort of the chaperones just getting up early, going and getting coffee a few blocks away at the Burger King, and all that was going on there. God provided in a powerful way, and God provided the coffee. The bathrooms were a bit of a problem, the showers were a bit of a problem, but one of the things I had a harder time with also was island time. Are you familiar with island time? In the Caribbean and the islands, everything happens very slow. You go to Walmart, the line is 40 people long. You go anywhere, and everybody seemed to move slow. How are you doing? Stacy, right? Wasn't it very slow? It's just a totally different way of life and moving, and it happened and they know it, and they just call it island time. They say, I'll be there in 10 minutes, but it might be an hour and 20 minutes. And that's perfectly fine. That's just the way things happen. Nobody's rushed, and everybody seems to move a little bit slower. Do you know that fits in very well? My sermon text this morning is this passage. We've been going through the Gospel of Luke all summer. It's from Luke chapter 10, and it's the account of two sisters. There's a lot of brothers who are prominent in scriptures. Cain and Abel, Joseph and his brothers, Jacob and his brother. But here we have two sisters, and there's a little bit of conflict going on. It's Mary and Martha. And I think Martha was the older sister, because do you know what happened? All of a sudden, Jesus and his disciples showed up. They're spending the night, and then they're going to eat dinner. And have you had 15 come over for dinner at the last minute ever? That's a lot of people, right? And what's happening when all these people show up at the house? Martha runs around and is busy, frantic, trying to get everything ready. She's running, she's frantic, she's working as hard as she can. But her sister, what is she doing to help? She's sitting down at the feet of Jesus and talking to him, listening to everything he has to say. And you know, I can see this progression in Martha. The first thing that happens is she looks at herself, she pities herself, and she says, you know what? Who's doing all the work here? Look at my sister. She's pitying herself for having to do all this work. Then she becomes angry. And who's she angry with? First, Mary, because she's not helping. And the next thing we have, she even goes to Jesus and said, Jesus, don't you care that my sister's doing nothing and I'm doing all the work? You know, the dangerous thing is after the anger and the self-pity, she begins to wonder and question God and saying, God, don't you care about me? And Jesus comes back and says to her, Martha, Martha, there's a lot of things that need to be done, but only one thing is needed. And Mary's chosen what's better. And I'm not going to take it away from her. Do you know, in the personalities of people, I see there's Martha-type people and there's Mary-type people. Martha is very type A. She wants to get things done. And you know what? I'm not going to knock that. You know, I'm probably more of a type A type personality. What was my one priority in Puerto Rico? You want to get up at 6 and drink my coffee and get going in the day. And sort of that's my personality all the time. I don't like just sitting. But Martha's that way. And you know what? We need people who get up and get things done. Because there's a lot of things that need to be done. And that's really important. But this verse in this passage says, you know what? There are times when you just got to stop. You want to stop and you want to sit and you want to speak to Jesus. You want to hear Jesus speak. And that's why we come to church. We stop the days going on around in the busyness and the rush of life, and for an hour we just stop and we focus upon God. We listen to him as he speaks to us and to his word, as he speaks his grace in communion. We stop and focus upon him. And Jesus reminds us, you know what, that we're loved, we're forgiven, and that no matter what's going on in life, he cares about you. He understands your problems, your issues, and he's with you, and he's always there. Do you know, rather, the other interesting thing is as I went on rushing to go out of town last weekend, we left Sunday morning, we had a death in the church, and I got the funeral bulletin for the memorial service this afternoon ready, and I quickly got it ready, and when I was working on the sermons on Puerto Rico. The gospel reading I chose for my sermon this afternoon is Mary and Martha, John chapter 11. And in Mary and Martha, in John chapter 11, these same two sisters, but in this case, do you know what happens? Their brother Lazarus died. In fact, he's dead and buried in the tomb 3 days. And then finally Jesus comes after they sent for him about 5 days earlier. He arrives after Lazarus has been in the tomb 3 days. And Martha, you know what? She was a woman of great faith. And when you hear Martha speak in John chapter 11, Martha says, "Oh, Jesus, I know my brother's going to rise because of your grace and the power of the resurrection." And Jesus says, "You know what? More than that can happen. He can rise right now." And then Mary comes and talks to Jesus. And she doesn't speak that much. She's really listening again. Same type personality. You know, Martha comes in and she starts talking and doing. Mary comes to Jesus and she just wants to listen to Jesus. Her personality is the same way in this moment of sorrow and grief. But then you remember what happens. Jesus goes out to the tomb of Lazarus. And he says, "Roll away the stone covering the tomb." And everybody there says, "He's been in there for 3 days. There's a smell. Why are you doing that?" And he says, "Roll away the tomb." And Jesus says, "Lazarus, come out." And Lazarus comes out. Do you know one of the great descriptions of Jesus that maybe you've never heard of? Have you heard Jesus called a grave robber? That's what he is. He's stealing people from the grave and giving them new life. And you know, that's the incredible promise that Jesus has at funerals. He robs people from the grave and gives them eternal life. And that's the blessing that he gives. And you know what that passage in that verse reminds us? You know what? Nothing is impossible with God. Absolutely nothing. And that's the great benefit of sitting at the feet of Jesus. Because we can be like Abraham and Sarah in the Old Testament reading. When they heard the news, and actually about a chapter earlier, God told Abraham that he was going to have a child. And their first response was they both laughed and said, "Yeah, like that's going to happen." But it didn't happen. Because nothing is impossible with God. And that's the great benefit. You know, when I remind you, just thinking about church as we gather together for this hour each week on Sunday morning, it reminds us as we sit and hear the words of Jesus that nothing is impossible. Forget about all the problems and issues of the world and have people sit and hear the words of Jesus and know his blessings, know his love, know who he is. Do you know what? And then all the other problems of life, they aren't that big a deal. Shower pressure, toilet problems, holes digging for fence posts. I know these guys, as they were digging to one side and putting in fence posts, or even doing this. There was rock hard. I mean, we were going through rock and concrete and steel and stone. It's the most amazing hard rock I've ever seen. But you know what? Pounding away at these holes sometimes for hours. 4 people, trying to get it down. But you finally make it. But nothing is impossible with God. We know that when we hear Jesus, when we see him. And may that blessing and promise be ours every day.